Welcome to the Consciousness Transformed tape group. Joel Goldsmith, practitioner tape group, and here we're in the practicality of waking up out of a dream and letting our consciousness be transformed, not having better ideas or anything. No, let it be transformed. From an horizontal point of view to an say inner vertical alignment with truth, and that's the transformed part. So it's not about getting a better dream or knowing better what to do, or no. So today we take a look at with the very specific tape. In fact, it's a personal sense and spiritual being. That is, of course, something that we look at a lot. And moving from this personal sense into a spiritual beingness is what the transformation is what this consciousness transformed is. And that's immediately also the difficulty, since you can say, like, who's listening to this? Who is listening to this with what ears? Who is watching this with what eyes? And all this. So that's the difficulty of trying to convey an idea like this, is actually totally impossible. But it is still possible. That's the great thing. So it has to be miraculous in that sense in order for you to receive this, because your personal involvement in this is not going to be of any help, since the only thing that you do with what you think, how you approach what you see, is implement everything into your thought system. That's a natural tendency of the mind. So that's something that Joel specifically hands over. He demonstrates what to do with it, and that's exactly like the meditation that we're going to do. Joel is instructing directly, like I use the recording of his voice in this specific meditation, and he immediately, in fact, steps back out of it as the Joel Goldsmith, or whoever you think he is, and leaving that completely behind and giving space for what is real. And this is consciousness transformed, demonstrated, like stepping back out of what you think you are, with all your considerations and good ideas and all your attempts and all your who knows what you do, placing your intentions, wanting to reach certain goals, and all this. It's like, that's not going to do it. No. Because there's a reason for it, and that reason is very lovely. And the thing is that you were created complete and whole and perfect in the likeness of your Father, in complete communication with your Father. So the only thing that really changes is any idea that is temporal, any idea that you could have about something, a conceptual sense of self, is what needs to be released. Now, this is exactly the tape of today. Personal sense of self needs to be released in order to say, literally, to transit or to transcend into something that is real. And transcend is motionless motion, like it doesn't go anywhere. No, it is realizing that reality is right here with you. So that is quite something. And like I said, I can tell you the ideas, I can tell you, sketch you, like with the concepts that we have, an image of it, but that isn't it. So the only possibility here that will avail you something is the possibility for a total experience of reality, like having to come into the release of your self-concepts, having to come to the release of what you think you are, including all your considerations about yourself. All this, whether that's good, whether that's bad, whether that's sick, whether that's healthy, whether that's rich, whether that's poor, and all this, you know this so well. It's like all duality will be released. And it has to be released in order to come to an experience of what is true, because truth doesn't need all these accessories of time. Now this is really, really something else. So let's go do the meditation. Joel will instruct you what to do and what to release, and in this. So
I, Joel, I do not think it. It declares itself, and it says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." It says, "Neither do I condemn thee." It says, "Thy sins of ignorance be forgiven thee." It says, "Knowest thou not, I, God, am ever with thee? I, God, will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I am come that thou might have life, and life more abundant. I am the bread, the meat, the wine, the water." And as this impartation flows in you and through you, you realize that this is not being personally said to you alone, that this is God speaking to his beloved Son, which I am, which thou art, which he is, which she is, which it is. In other words, the voice says, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine." And it is not speaking to Jew or Gentile. It is not speaking to American or foreigner. It is not speaking to white or black. It is speaking to the beloved Son, which I am, which thou art, universally. And therefore, a relationship is revealed between God the Father and God the Son, or God the Daughter. A universal, divine relationship which never began and will never end. There are no errors and no sins that we could commit as humans that would separate us from the love and the life of God.
All right, thank you so much for joining in the meditation, in this beautiful part that Joel shares with us. So the great part of it is Joel's immediately steps out of the way, like it is telling you this, it is telling you this, not anything else. So the response to any of this is really like an experience. Like in order to receive what is actually given, you come into an experience of this universal relationship. So otherwise nothing has happened. And this is the part that is, maybe new to hear, but it's like that is something that where this is about. And that's of course, say, confrontative to a certain degree, because if you say like, well, I love the words, I love the sound of it, and I think it's great, it was a beautiful meditation, that's also wonderful, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. That is just like what is being offered here is like extending so far beyond your own ideas that you want that, you hear that, and you recognize that in the beauty that you hear and in that what comes to you, but you can completely dive into that. And that's the invitation that Joel sends out, in fact, in this. And he does that too because this is about spiritual being, huh? This is the talk between two worlds and say material sense, spiritual being. Now, the material sense we know very well, and it has become so, say, common and familiar that you literally place everything in that standard, like even with your perception, even with the ideas that you have, even with the planning that you make. But even, and this we come to in what Joel shares with us too, like even in your spiritual path, you the ideas that are coming to you, you try to implement into your human ideas of yourself, your human concepts, and this is the part that's not going to work. We have seen that for 2,000 years in praying to God, to a God that doesn't exist, for health, for peace, for this, for that, and all kinds of requests that we made, thinking that this all-loving God would take care of it for us in our dream, while he doesn't know anything about this dream. So this is a wake-up call. That's what this is. It's like it's a wake-up call. What Joel sends out is a wake-up call. Wake up. And this is not what it is. This is not where you should place your trust. This is not. Like all this. And like I said, in your spiritual path, you might even have a plan what's the best for you, or like what you have as a practice, what you think will work best, or who knows what. Like all that is absolutely, in that sense, useless, because you don't know what's the best for you or how to wake up out of this. You cannot do that yourself. And this is what we said in the first meetings that we had in Consciousness Transformed too. It's like, if you still have ideas about yourself, if you still come back to trying to balance out your life in this spiritual transformation, the only thing that you're doing is protecting yourself from a change in that. So protecting yourself by literally preserving what is familiar to you, allowing new ideas to come into that, but not releasing the old ideas. And this is a very common, say, step in the transformational path, that you start to recognize that you are sorting this out. You think, oh, this is helpful, that's not so helpful, and that I don't like, and that I like, and blah, blah, blah. And really thinking that these ideas have value. So the whole sorting out doesn't make sense. There is nothing that needs to be sorted out, especially not by you, because you cannot see beyond your thoughts if you keep holding on to your ideas. So that's why Joel is inviting you to a release of personal sense, a release of personal concepts, a release of a perceptual selfhood. That is, of course, apart from God, because it is based on ideas. And it's based on concepts, and it's about opinions. It's about having ideas about something. When you recognize yourself doing that, it has nothing to do with reality. So this is the one thing that you want to experience, and now you're preventing yourself from having this experience just because you hold on to ideas that you hold about yourself. And that's, you don't even know that you're doing it. It's like that. It's like you cannot teach yourself out of it, or you cannot make a plan to get yourself out of it. No, you have to admit that your life, as you call life, which is really death, is unmanageable. That the way that you try to balance everything, that you try to work it out, that you think, well, should be the best thing for you to do, is not what's going to be helpful to you. And so in your admission that you see, like, oh my God, I still am trusting my own ideas, and what do they give me but what I know already? So it's like, I know my past ideas, I know my ideas very well, so do you. It's like you know your ideas very well, and they will not change if you still keep holding on to them and thinking that in the future they will change and it will be better. This time it will be better, something like this. Like, that's not going to work. Now, Joel says this, what I'm sharing with you right now, and Joel shares this in different ways. And we're going to look at some expressions before we start to listen to the talk. So I have some time to do that. That's great. So let's take a look at some of the expressions from this very specific talk that we're listening to. When prayer, we start with prayer. When prayer is a recognition of the nature of God as omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, closer than breathing, then instead of trying, so when we come to this recognition, instead of trying to bring the spiritual grace of God to a mortal concept of man, we're actually truly in prayer, in the realization of our spiritual identity. See, this is the activity. When prayer is a recognition of the nature of God, instead of trying to bring spiritual grace of God to a mortal concept of man, we're actually truly in prayer. Now this needs practice. So the mind is quick in its response to situations. So it wants even to use prayer as a way to to solve the problem that's in front of you. Think, well, with a little bit of God, I could do this, and this is the part that doesn't work. So the thing that I wanted to share basically is then through prayer. In fact, true prayer doesn't go anywhere. Like, it doesn't go anywhere in the sense of not a future goal, not an achievement. It doesn't have an intention. It doesn't have that. No, it is in fact standing still to realize your foundation in God, recognizing the nature of God. And this recognition is an experience. It is not an intellectual recognition of, oh yeah, now I know what that is. Like, now, if you think now I know what it is, then it isn't that. No, this is a brand new experience. It's always new. It always comes like a surprise. And it's like the joyous part in your consciousness where you connect with. Suddenly that opens up. That is what prayer is. And so this is our practice. I keep repeating that, but this is our practice. And all right, well, let's continue, because we'll see more. The recognition, the realization, the acknowledgement of our spiritual identity is prayer. The recognition, the realization, the acknowledgement of our spiritual identity is prayer. And it is this prayer that brings the spiritual grace of God to individual experience. So this is also so wonderful to use this. Like the recognition, the realization, and the acknowledgement of our spiritual identity is prayer. And it is this prayer that brings spiritual grace of God to individual experience. See, this is what Joel said in the talk too, in the meditation that we listened to. What he said was exactly that. It's like this leads to an experience. Like the recognition is in fact what a revelation is. It is a communion with God and you. Like it's coming to you as an individual experience. An individual experience of a universal relationship. And it comes to you individually, and it is being said that way. It's like it's a subjective experience. You are experiencing that. But the part in that, and this was what we saw in the meditation too, so the part in it is that it is your individual experience, but it includes everyone, and that becomes literally palpable when you experience it. So you experience it personally, but then also in the recognition that it isn't personal at all, that it really covers everything. Like suddenly, in fact, there's nobody outside of you any longer. No, this is what you recognize. It's my individual experience that there's nothing outside of me. And that doesn't exclude anyone. No, you recognize that everyone is included. It brings you to an experience of the totality of who you are, of oneness, of joining, of universal relationship, seeing that everything is in communication, perfect, like perfect communication, that there's nothing or no one left out. This is the most important part, and this is also the hardest part to in fact get, because you're so accustomed to separating yourself out of the equation that you think you know what this is, but actually you're placing yourself continuously out of the equation, thinking that, well, I don't really need to do that, or not for now. No, thank you. And say in that sense, becoming in a certain sense comfortable in your isolation, in your separation. You become comfortable in that, because in order, and this is the part that we're actually talking about, in order to come to this universal experience, you go through an episode in which you experience like a death of humanhood. Like you literally come to the experience that your selfhood is literally meaningless. It doesn't do anything. It is flat. It is dead. It doesn't do anything. So as soon as the grace of God comes into your consciousness, then all this makes sense, because then you experience what aliveness is, what really life is. Up to that point, you have no idea. You try to work it out in your mind and try to stay comfortable. And so this is like, that's the most difficult part in this consciousness transformed, to let that occur, because you don't like to go through a death episode. You don't like to release your individual values, your individual certainties in which you keep everything together. You don't like that, to release that, because literally you don't know what's coming next. You don't know what the next step is and how that will look. So natural tendency is to defend yourself, or to say like, yeah, that's great, but at the same time like, no, that's great, yeah, let's not get too close. And that's really the occurrence. So this, if you experience the grace of God, you know exactly where you stand. if you're not experiencing the grace of God, you're defending yourself. You're literally defending yourself against this, while you think that you're doing something spiritual, so to speak. And that is not that. So you cannot do anything spiritual. You're not spiritual man in that sense. You're not spiritual man unless you are in the experience of your contact. Then you're spiritual man. But you have ideas about spirituality, or you have ideas about yourself, or you think that you're doing pretty good in your selfhood, then you're fooling yourself. You're not spiritual man in that moment. So the release is the invitation, the release of self-identity, the release of conceptual selfhood. So Joel says it different and with different words, but he says exactly the same thing, of course. Like, that's easy to recognize when you are in the experience of grace of God. Actually, in this prayer, we are experience. Actually, in this prayer, we are surrendering the personal sense of man, rather than trying to bring God's grace to the personal sense of man. So that's exactly what's occurring. In this prayer, we are experience. Actually, in this prayer, we are surrendering the personal sense. And surrendering is literally recognizing it, that it is meaningless, even though we were holding on to it, thinking it was something that gave us security and safety and comfort. Remember always, spiritual healing does not mean trying to bring the power of God to a human being. It does not mean trying to bring the infinite riches of God to a poor mortal. It does not mean making of God an employment agency or a marriage counselor. It really means giving up the personal sense of self, letting it die, rather than trying to get God's grace for it. All attempts to benefit man, whose breath is in his nostrils, by spiritual means, must fail. It cannot not. Man whose breath is in his nostrils, the natural man, the creature, must be permitted to die in order that the resurrection takes place. There's just no other way. Well, love flows out from within you. Oh yeah, that's right. As soon as you enter into the experience of the love that you are, you're literally flowing it, letting it flow out from you. All right, so this is pretty clear. That's lovely. So in that sense, it is a universal spiritual ideas or practice. It comes down to the same thing. It really doesn't matter in that sense. It's like, in order to come into real experiences of the truth of who you are, you will have to let go of what is familiar to you. You have to let go of what you think you are. Because what you are doesn't need ideas. What you are is an experience. What you are has nothing to do with concepts. And this is what Joel shares in this talk specifically. Now, in this talk, we listen to the second part of the talk, because the first part I've used in the meditation already, which was a real essential part of the first half hour, leading up to that. And so now we take the next step and listen to the second half. So let's start with that.
And that personal sense of I can only exist while we are in the state of the natural man, the man who is not under the law of God, neither indeed can be, because that man, that sense of I, beholds good powers and evil powers, whereas in this other world in this higher consciousness, I, God, is the substance of all form, and therefore there is no destructive form. Personal sense, based on this personal sense of I, aware only through the 5 physical senses and the thinking mind, judging by appearances, knows good and evil. Through the spiritual faculty of discernment, when we are seeing as I the Father, seeing as I the Son, there is but one world, one universe, one consciousness appearing, manifesting as individual, you and me. Now see what happens. In this world of man, there is an experience called abundance and an experience called lack. Both abundance and lack are based on this belief of a personal selfhood I. I have or I have not. And the moment you have transcended that personal sense of I, you discover, it is stated so clearly in Scripture, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And here you have completely eliminated my abundance or my lack, because I neither have nor have not. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And then, when we have yielded up both our abundance and our lack, then the Father says to the Son, Son, all that I, the Father, hath is thine. And then there is no more abundance or lack. There is only allness, infinity, completeness. In the same way, with our loves and our hates, our likes and our dislikes, the moment that the personal sense of selfhood has been overcome, we neither love nor hate, we neither like nor dislike. But the wisdom and the love of the Father, which is expressed as the Son, flows freely back and forth between us, so that it is the love of God which is flowing as the love between men and women of the world. Not my love, not thy love. The love of the Father manifest as the love of the Son. And therefore, it is God's love flowing between us. The infinite nature of God's love eliminates hate, envy, jealousy, prejudice, malice, fear. None of these can be overcome. Mark this. You cannot overcome hates, dislikes, distrusts, fears, animosities, jealousies, as long as there is a personal sense of self, as long as you entertain a personal sense of yourself or of me, you cannot overcome these negative qualities of man whose breath is in his nostril. Only by rising into this other world, this higher consciousness, where you recognize that I, the Father, and I, the Son, are one, and that all that the Father hath is mine, only then can you recognize that the selfhood of me is the selfhood of thee. The selfhood of thee is the selfhood of me. And we are one in our divine sonship with God. All that the Father hath belongs to each and every one of us. And this wipes out man whose breath is in his nostril, who eventually must be overcome. Man whose breath is in his nostril, who we are told must die daily and must be reborn of the Spirit. And here you have it. In this recognition of the nature of personal selfhood, you are dying to the personal sense of self, and you are being reborn. Each time that you can acknowledge the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, you are dying to the personal sense of selfhood. Each time that you can acknowledge I, the Father, and I, the Son, is one, and look out upon all mankind in the same way, you are dying to man whose breath is in his nostril, and you are being reborn of the Spirit. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I, the Father, will never leave I, the Son. And therefore, as we bear consciously in thought, as we abide consciously in this communion, I, the Father, and I, the Son, in this intimate communion of selfhood, of divine being, all that the Father hath clothes me, feeds me, houses me, governs, maintains, sustains. Paul says to pray without ceasing. And this is the one and only way in which it can be done, when prayer is a communion. And when, regardless of what we are doing with our lips or body, we can reserve one tiny part of our consciousness for a constant reminder. I and the Father are one. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And this wipes out all personal sense of self. I therefore have no problem to overcome. No animosities, no jealousies, no weapon that is formed against God can prosper. Then only as I and the Father are one can I say, no weapon that is formed against me can prosper. Since the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the Lord is this I in the midst of me, this I in the midst of me is the health of my countenance, my fortress, my high tower. I need no external reliance, and I need have no fear of anything external while I have I in the midst of me, while I am abiding in the I in the midst of me, and while I am consciously letting the I in the midst of me abide in me. Whither shall I flee from I? If I mount up to heaven, I am there. If I make my bed in hell, I am there. If I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I am there. For I am come that I might have life, and that I might have life more abundant. And so I abide in the I within me, and I consciously keep that I abiding within me. I in the Father, and the Father in me. One. This is prayer that is not seeking something. This is prayer that is not begging, pleading, demanding. This is the prayer of the recognition of the relationship between I the Father and I the Son. This is the prayer of communion, abiding in the Father and letting the Father abide in me. Then, looking out, I have no personal opinions, because now the I that I am sees truly. Sees no presence apart from God, sees no power apart from God, hears no evil, knows no evil, recognizes God, the divine consciousness, as the selfhood of all being. Prayer has too often been an attempt to bring the spiritual grace of God to humanhood. And this is the reason for unanswered prayer. The attempt to bring the grace of God, the gift of the Spirit, to man whose breath is in his nostril, who is not under the law of God, and neither indeed can be. When prayer is communion, when prayer is a recognition of the nature of God as omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, closer than breathing, then Instead of trying to bring the spiritual graces of God to a mortal concept of man, we are actually truly in prayer, in the realization of our spiritual identity. The recognition, the realization, the acknowledgement of our spiritual identity is prayer, and is the prayer that brings the spiritual grace of God to individual experience. Actually, in this prayer, we are surrendering the personal sense of man rather than trying to bring God's grace to the personal sense of man. Remember always, spiritual healing does not mean trying to bring the power of God to a human being. It does not mean trying to bring the infinite riches of God to a poor mortal. It does not mean making of God an employment agency or a marriage counselor. It really means giving up the personal sense of self, letting it die rather than trying to get God's grace for it, so that the Son of Man, the Son of God, so that the Son of God can be raised up in place of that Son of Man. But the Son of Man may die, and out of that death there take place a resurrection which is the Son of God. All attempts to benefit man whose breath is in his nostril by spiritual means must fail. Man whose breath is in his nostril, the natural man, the creature, must be permitted to die in order that the resurrection take place and the Son of God be raised up where I am, where thou art. Then we no longer have material health or material wealth, but we have spiritual grace. And then we discover how literally true it is that thy grace is my sufficiency. Thy grace is my sufficiency. Thy grace is my bread, meat, wine, and water, clothing, housing, companionships. Thy grace fulfills me. Thy grace is the invisible robe Thy grace is the robe that makes me invisible to the carnal mind, to world belief, to the mind of man. We hasten the day of our death and resurrection as we consciously remember, and remember, consciously remember, not to judge by appearances, to remember constantly that I am not to judge by what I see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, but that I am to be still and let this inner wisdom reveal to me that which is before me. Then, in that moment of silence, in that moment of ceasing judgment, the inner wisdom says, "This is my beloved child, in whom I am well pleased." This is thy brother, this is thy sister. This is thy selfhood in another form. The moment judgment enters thought, remember that word I, and smile to yourself that you have momentarily allowed the personal sense of I to come in. And then as you pause for a moment, the real I, that I am, takes over and reveals truth. And it does it in so many different ways. If I, Joel, have been fearing a germ, infection, contagion, storms, waves, bombs, then wisdom reveals that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So what have you to fear? The earth is the Lord's. Is there any evil in the earth? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, all that is therein. And you find yourself relaxed. You no longer fear the appearance. This one remembrance is a great healing influence, and it develops healing consciousness. Just to remember that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and all that there is in. And fear disappears. Resentment disappears. Anger disappears. And you begin to behold the actual world of God's creating. And you'll see why, when this is further recognized, that the lamb will lie down with the lion. You will understand why it is that metaphysicians have always been able to heal germ diseases. You will understand why metaphysicians have always been able to turn enemies into friends. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, and all that is therein. Now just see how wonderful the earth is. Only in this way can we really find beauty, harmony in our family lives, in our community lives, in our national and our international lives. Only when we can see and hear through spiritual discernment, this is my beloved Son. White or black, ignorant or wise, these are only distinctions, differences created by the ignorance of believing that there is a selfhood, an I, apart from God. We are constantly living between these two worlds, the world of appearance and the world of spiritual cognition, recognition, awareness. Of course, as we persist in lifting ourselves above the level of man whose breath is in his nostril, we must eventually attain the fullness of the Godhead bodily. We must eventually attain the fullness of God's glory. But until then, each one of us must, by our own dedication and devotion, abide in this inner prayer, this inner communion, until more and more of spiritual grace, of the spiritual robe, descends upon us, until it wholly envelops us. Thank you.
The one mistake that you could make now is trying to see a better world, or trying to see God in everything or something. Like, that would be a mistake to try to do that. Because we're talking here about inner communion first. Like, inner communion needs to happen. This is what Joel says in the last expressions that he gives. Like, it starts within. If this inner communion is taking place, then of course everything will look different outside too. But it's, don't depend on anything outside is the first step. Like, you go within. That's why something else can occur. So the recognition of your wholeness, but the recognition of the earth and the fullness thereof. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof is something that occurs within you. It has nothing to do with the earth that you see with your eyes. Now this makes it totally different, but it's a common confusion now to try to look with different eyes to everything. It's like, no, that's not the occurrence. No, we're talking here about consciousness transformed. How does consciousness transform? By releasing all ideas that you have about the world, by releasing all ideas that you have about your president, by releasing all ideas that you have about yourself, about God, about Jesus, about who knows what. Like releasing all these ideas, you come to your withinness and recognizing there is nothing outside of you that is opposing you, but you come to that in your withinness. There's nowhere else that can be found. Now, if that is realized and recognized within you, then everything will start to look different, of course. That makes total sense. So first, the recognition, the experience of grace within you before anything else. So otherwise, you're trying something that will fail too. You cannot see the world in a better way with your own eyes. You will see indifferences. You will do all these things. Like the real world has nothing to do with what you see. The real world has to do with what you recognize to be one with you. And that has nothing to do with form in that sense. It is a recognition beyond form. That's why it's whole. If you would look at objects, if you would look at things outside yourself, then you can never find that. If you see it from within, the recognition that I and my Father are one, that is a whole experience of myself. Of course, everything is included in that, but also has nothing to do anymore with what you see with your eyes. Now everything starts to look different at the same time. That's the dilemma, you could say. That's the paradox in the whole story. Like you see everything different, but it also doesn't matter anymore in that sense. It doesn't matter because nothing is depending on it. No, it is you recognizing yourself as the light of the world, recognizing that in your acceptance of this, what Joel is conveying to you, you have recognized that everything is within you, that there is nothing outside of you that can upset you. There's nothing outside of you that can attack you. And in this total recognition, the world disappears. But what is real still remains. And this you bring into this world. There's just no other way to say it, really. This is my experience of it. I can tell you that. It's like this is how that an experience is not explainable. That's obvious. So in your recognition of this, we communicate perfectly. Does it have anything to do with this character speaking to you? No, not at all. Does it have anything to do with the voice of Joel? No, of course not. Does it have anything to do with this world? No, no longer. That's why it's free to be itself. And that you start to recognize everywhere. It is not depending, it's not disturbed by anything. All right, so this I wanted to add to it because otherwise it's like this is a common mistake to pick something up or try to see it different with your effort to see it different, and that's gonna fail. As simple as that. So you need help from within your recognition of totality. So thank you so much for today. Thank you for being part of the tape group, the Consciousness Transformed tape group, and I hope to see you next week in the next episode. Thank you for everything and see you soon.